Music Business Radio is brought to you by Avenue Bank, dedicated to serving the music business industry. Find out more at thedifferenceisreal.com.
From Music City, USA, it's David Hooper and Music Business Radio.
From the TuneIn Broadcasting Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, this is David Hooper, and you're listening to Music Business Radio. With me today, Gregg Bissonette. He's played with a wide range of artists on stage and in the studio, including David Lee Roth, Don Henley, Duran Duran, Ray Charles, and Carlos Santana. He's currently a member of Ringo Starr and his All-Starr band. Welcome to Music Business Radio.
David, thank you very much. Wow, what a great intro. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
I was going to say I'm glad to have you here, but you're from KRTH 101 in Los Angeles.
I've been out on tour all summer with Ringo Starr and his All-Star band, and even though I'm a drummer, you'd think, well, why does Ringo Starr need a drummer? He's the greatest drummer in the world. Well, he goes up front and sings all his hits, so when he's up front singing, he needs a drummer in the back, and then his favorite thing to do is just go back and play drums, and we play double drums, and on all the other members of the All-Star band's hits, Colin Hay, Edgar Winter, Billy Squier, Hamish Stewart from the Average White Band, Gary Wright. We do all these great hits, and so we played Saturday night at the Greek Theater here in L.A., so I've done 2 tours with Ringo. The All-Star band does a different kind of touring thing. I've done 2 different promo tours with Ringo. My brother Matt played bass on them. They were with Ringo and the Roundheads in 2003 and 2005. We did all the promos for his albums, like all the Letterman, Leno, Good Morning America, Regis, and then we did a live DVD in Chicago in 2005. But on a tour like this, with Ringo, you pretty much just stay in a base city and fly out of a main hotel hub. So we were just flying in for the sound check, did the gig, and then took off right after the gig, soaking wet into the limo, onto the Ringo jet, and back to the hub. So I couldn't come in. I wanted to come in and do something in Nashville, but I was only in for like 5 hours.
And you've toured with a lot of acts. Now, I'm not sure if you've toured with, but we've got, Duran Duran, Ray Charles, Carlos Santana. Now, I know you toured with Spinal Tap.
Yeah, I recorded with Ray Charles and recorded with Duran Duran on their Pop Trash album. Just one song, but it was a really cool chance to record with those guys. And then I recorded with Carlos Santana on Supernatural. I played on one song called El Farol, which actually won an instrumental Grammy that year, but I never played live on tour with Carlos. But anyway, I toured a lot and recorded a lot from like 85 to 92 with David Lee Roth, 7 years, and I toured and recorded a lot with Joe Satriani and with James Taylor and Toto in Europe after Jeff Porcaro. When he passed away, he was the drummer in Toto, and he passed away, and then I got a chance to fill in for about 4 months with Toto, touring live. And so there's certain groups I've just kind of recorded with and not toured with, and other groups that I've toured with and not recorded with, and Spinal Tap's kind of one I did both with. I've recorded a few of their songs in the last 10 years, but I've also gotten to tour with them quite a bit. We played Live Earth at Wembley Stadium last July, in front of 80,000 people for the big global warming summit, and that was a blast. We were in between the Foo Fighters and Metallica, and then Madonna was on the bill, the Chili Peppers. It was a real great chance. And in America, people get Spinal Tap, but in England, they really, really get it. They had the cucumbers with the tinfoil, and they had the posters, and of course, Christopher Guest came out, instead of saying, "Hello, Wembley," he said, "Hello, Wimbledon," and they all got it,
Well, what is the difference between touring with Ringo, which is what you're doing now, and touring with somebody like Roth? You mentioned one of those things is you've got a base city, but what are the other differences? I mean, you've got a limo, but it wasn't always like that when you started your career, was it?
Oh, no. When I started my career, I started off in my high school band. Well, my junior high school band, my brother Matt was the bass player. He's still my favorite bass player, of all time. But we've always grown up playing in bands together. The junior high band, the high school band, the top 40 and band in college that helped me get through college, playing 5 nights a week, playing disco in top 40 clubs in the 70s. I'm 49, and so I was born in 59. So I'm 49 years old now. When I was 18 and in college, disco was in full height of the disco era. So I played and got through college by playing in a top 40 band, and you always tear down your own drums and set up your own drums. And then I did all that. And then my first tour was with Maynard Ferguson in 1982. 1972, I joined the band, Maynard Ferguson's big band, that my brother Matt was already a member of. Toured with that band and recorded with that band. And then from then, I think the next gig was Gino Vanelli. I was a huge fan of albums like Brother to Brother and Mark Craney, one of his drummers. It was one of my best friends. But David Lee Roth was the first really big rock and roll tour I ever did. And that was, as I said, from 85 to 92. And we toured the world, and we traveled by private jet, did the tour buses and everything. But we mainly in the States traveled by tour buses. And that's how most of the tours I've done have been, where you do the gig and you hang out later, party with your friends and family, and then you go back to the hotel, get your bags together, get on the tour bus, go to the next city, get in, in the morning, sleep for a while, get up, have your day free in that city, do the sound check, do the gig, and then it all starts over. But yeah, this was really different because it was pretty much fly into a city, do the sound check, do the gig, see your friends and family before the show, and then take off and go back to the hub city. So it was just, I'll tell you, this has been the most amazing summer of my life. I have always been a Beatle fanatic. When my dad, who's also a drummer, Bud Bissonette, when I was a kid, my dad had a band, and they played weddings and private parties. And in 1966 in Detroit, my dad was playing a wedding at a hotel called the Whittier Hotel in downtown Detroit. And he came out on one of his breaks, and he heard girls just screaming and going crazy. And he said, "What is going on here?" And the hotel food and beverage manager said, "Bud, the Beatles are staying upstairs." He said, "The Beatles?" He said, "My kids love the Beatles. I love the Beatles. Who doesn't love the Beatles?" And he asks the silly question night before the gig, right? "Are there any tickets that I might be able to buy some tickets?" And the guy said, "Bud, they've been sold out for months. This is the Beatles. They're playing Olympia Hockey Arena where the Red Wings used to play. It's torn down now. They're playing Olympia Hockey Arena tomorrow night. You can't buy tickets to a Beatles show. But come back on your next break. I'll see if I can do you any good." My dad finishes a gig at 1 a.m. and the guy comes up to him and says, "Bud, I got good news and bad news. I've got 6 tickets for you, but it's going to be a total of $36. $6 a piece, $36 total." And my dad's like, "You got to be kidding." And for $36, 6 of us went and saw the Beatles the next night at Olympia Hockey Arena in 1966. And I was 7 years old.
That had to have been just an amazing experience.
David, I just could not believe that I was in the room. 7 years old. I couldn't believe I was in the same room as John, Paul, George, and Ringo. I was just freaking. When they came on stage, you could hardly hear anything, because they were singing through the same PA that the announcer was saying. "And now on the ice, number 9, Gordie Howe." Right. Same PA. You could barely hear them. But I'm just going, I'm in the same room with these guys. And then I asked Ringo, and I met him on the first promo tour in 2003. I said, "Do you by any chance remember playing at Olympia Hockey Arena in Detroit in 1966 with the Beatles?" And he says, "Man, I do remember that gig because, Detroit's a rough town anyway. But on the Beatles tours, they threw their purses and high heel shoes, and everyone was just throwing stuff on the stage because they were so, 'Oh, please take my high heel shoes,' or whatever." Well, some kid beamed Ringo in the head with a jagged, hard piece of Hard Rock candy.
No, that wasn't you, was it?
It wasn't me, I swear. It wasn't me. But they had to stop the show. He says, "I remember that gig, Detroit, 66. I got hit in the head with a piece of Hard Rock candy."
Let me go back and ask you about the Roth tour. Was that really what you would call your first really big tour? Because you're like a big band guy.
Well, that's how the music business is, and this is music business radio. The music business is just what you said. I mean, drummers, producers, other instrumentalists, artists, fans, record companies, everybody says, "You live in Nashville, you must be a country drummer," meaning you just play country. My first gig was with Maynard Ferguson, and I was in the North Texas State Lab Band, and I love big band. So when I was with Maynard, I was a big band guy. And then I got the gig with David Lee Roth. "So you're a hard rock guy." And then I got a gig with James Taylor, and "You must be the folky kind of brush fire and rain guy." And then you get a gig with Santana. "You must be the Latin rock guy." And David, what you said is perfect, because, David Lee Roth, to me, he's a brilliant, brilliant guy, and he's an amazing entertainer, a great singer, great songwriter, great friend. And basically, I thought, oh man, I'm going into this audition as the big band guy. And so Dave at the audition said, what's the last gig you did? And I said, well, I thought you will never have heard of Maynard Ferguson. And I said, well, Maynard Ferguson. And Dave, being as astute and such a musicologist as he is, he says, you mean Maynard Ferguson, the jazz trumpet player, high note specialist that has the big band? I go, wow. I said, yeah. And he goes, and then I think, oh no, he's not going to hire me because he'll think I'm just a big band swing kind of light hitting kind of guy. And he goes, man, if you can power that 18-piece big band, surely you can power Steve Vai, Billy Sheehan, and I, the four of us together. Welcome to the band. And
wow.
I'm like, wow.
So wait, so you'd already played though, right?
Well, I auditioned with them, and my first audition was with Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan. They were kind of, there's something out here. There's also one in Nashville. I'm sure you know of it, Dave, called SIR, Studio
right.
Instrument Rentals. There's one in Nashville, there's one in New York, and there's one in LA.
So let's explain that for all the listeners. It's basically like a rehearsal studio.
Exactly.
And you rent rooms. Bands like Roth will go there and I can practice for the tour and try new drummers out.
Exactly. And he had just left Van Halen. It was 1985. And he told Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan, go out and find us a drummer. There was an ad that came out in the local LA paper that Steve Vai was looking for a drummer. Actually, it was Dave, but he couldn't put David Lee Roth looking for a drummer. There'd be 2 million people there. They'd fly in from everywhere in the world. And even though Steve Vai was well known at the time, he was in Zappa's band. He had just taken Yngwie Malmsteen's place in Alcatraz. He could put an ad in the LA Weekly and say Steve Vai auditioning drummers, and a couple hundred drummers would show up as opposed to a couple million with Dave. So there was this big old line outside of SIR, and I was just one of about 300 guys on a Saturday afternoon that went in there, and by the grace of God, got by that audition. So the next audition was with Dave, and so that was his first question. Who was the last gig you've done? So, and then he said, how did you get 40 songs together for this audition? Steve and Billy just auditioned you yesterday, and even though we've been writing songs for several weeks, how did you learn all these songs overnight? And I said, well, I followed Steve back to his house, and he had cassette tapes at the time. This is 85, cassette tapes of the rehearsals. And so I just stayed up late last night and I wrote out charts of all the tempos, all the beats, all the hits, and tried to chart them out. And he goes, wait a minute. You read music? I said, yeah, I read music. And he goes, and that's what led to the Maynard Ferguson thing. So Dave was like, wow, somebody that reads music that can play in a big band. Because one of the tunes that he wanted to record on the album we were about to record was a big band version of Frank Sinatra's That's Life. That's Life, with the horns and everything. Mm-hmm. So he was thinking, great, a drummer that can play big band. And I just heard him play rock and shuffles and double bass, Hot for Teacher kind of stuff. And so it was real important to Dave to get somebody that was really well-rounded and could play different styles of music. So,
well, and for all the drummers out there that are listening and say, oh, I don't need to read music, or all the musicians, that's the exact reason why you need to read music. It gives you that edge.
I go out and do a lot of drum seminars, and there's all these drum festivals around the world. And you'll get kids, you'll get adults, you'll get everyone asking questions like, I don't really want to read music because then I'll be more of a over-the-top drummer that doesn't really play with feel, they just read. And I say, wait a minute, do you mean to tell me that Steve Gadd, one of the greatest studio drummers of all time, that plays with Eric Clapton, James Taylor, Paul Simon, he could read anything? You mean to tell me because Steve Gadd can read great that he doesn't play with feel? And the guy said, oh, no, I didn't mean to say that. It's an extra thing. If you read, it can help, you're always going to have an edge, like you say, David, if you can read.
You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio. More with Gregg Bissonette when we return.
I'm Bart Herbison, Executive Director of the Nashville Songwriters Association International, and you're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the biz.
Why can't visiting a bank be more like visiting your favorite neighborhood restaurant, where you walk in and are immediately welcomed and appreciated? Where a banker actually greets you, shakes your hand, and calls you by your name. Not by your credit score or your account number, but by your name. At Avenue Bank, we call that concierge service. And it may not be what you'd expect from a bank, but it's what you'd like a bank to be. Visit thedifferencesreal.com. Avenue Bank. Member FDIC.
Hey, I'm Kix Brooks from Brooks & Dunn, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
Now back to a special edition of Music Business Radio with Gregg Bissonette.
Now, that time period, the first Roth solo album, what you said was 85?
Well, the first Roth solo album was actually in 85, but it was before I joined the band. He was still in Van Halen when he branched off and did an album called Crazy from the Heat.
Oh, right, yeah, EP, right.
As an EP, and that had California Girls, Just a Gigolo, Edgar Winter's, Easy Street, a couple other tunes. And that was produced by Ted Templeman. It was on Warner's, but he was kind of still in Van Halen. He just wanted to do, as so many great singers do, they do little solo projects on the side, and that was John Robinson, J.R. Robinson on drums, and a great cast of studio musicians that played on that. I think Sid McGuinness from the David Letterman Band, and Brian May on piano. Edgar Winter played on it, but that was kind of his first testing of the waters, but he was still in Van Halen. But Eat 'Em and Smile was the first album he did as a solo artist once he had left Van Halen and started his own band.
When it came out, he obviously, being in Van Halen, he's already got the fan base, and you're all of a sudden playing in front of 10, 20,000. It's from a period I call like arena rock, and that's when it really was. I mean, those were big shows back then. How did you keep your ego in check? All of a sudden, you're going and playing these big shows. Obviously, you had some success before, but was that difficult?
Great question, David. You know, my dad, as I mentioned, is a drummer, and my mom, who we unfortunately lost a year and a half ago, she was the vibes player in my dad's band, and they just came from the music business, you know, roots, and they always told my brother and sister and I, you know, look, when you're playing and you're learning your instrument, learning your craft, no matter what gigs you get or you don't get, don't ever get an ego. You know, always remember that right over your shoulder is someone that probably can play with better groove, better time, has newer drums, shinier cymbals, and can read better and can play faster and faster double bass and faster single stroke hand speed, and that's younger and better looking and can do the job cheaper. And he's right.
Yeah.
There's no way in this business that you can survive with an ego, because 50% of it is how do you play, but 50% of it is what kind of person are you? Because nobody wants to be on a tour bus or a private jet or at the Elks Lodge with somebody who is full of themselves. Usually those people get weeded out. And when you recommend somebody for a gig, they can be a great player, but if they don't have the right attitude, somebody that's not a complainer, and somebody that realizes that by the grace of God, you're able to play your instrument and get paid for it, those kind of people always, you know, the people that are humble and that are always realizing that it is a blessing to make a living in the music business, those people seem to rise to the top and survive. The people that always complain and badmouth and just are not fun to be around, those are the people that don't seem to get called back.
Well, have you found that the very successful people that you've dealt with, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, you're kind of known, at least what I know about you, you play with a lot of what I would call technicians. I mean, these guys are very skilled people, and it's obvious that they practice a lot. Have you found that they're really cool guys to hang out with as well, and they kind of respect the art as well?
Yeah, they do. In a short answer, I'll give you the long-winded answer in a second, but my short Reader's Digest answer is yes. Joe Satriani and Steve Vai are salt of the earth. Italian-American, went to the same high school. Joe was Steve's first teacher. You know, I've been to Steve's home on Long Island where he grew up, and the family dinner comes out, and mom and dad are hanging out, and the cousins and the brothers and the sisters. It's the same with the Satriani family or the Stefano Vaiano family. You know, it's all wonderful, big group of family musicians. You know, I don't really think I could count on one hand the people that I've worked with that are that class of player or singer or entertainer that is really not a cool person.
Well, it sounds like from what you're saying, they wouldn't be around very long.
No, you know.
I mean, there's a lot of really good musicians, and that's kind of, it's like reading sheet music, writing those charts. It's one of those things that can kind of take you over the top when you're a nice guy.
Yeah, you know, people know really quick when you're on a bus, a tour bus, it's kind of like you're on your own little submarine underwater, and attitudes and egos, you know, you can bring a party of 10 down real quick if you're the one that's a real pant load out there. You know, you don't need people that just are hard to deal with, you know, the root canal personality, like, oh man, do I have to, it's 4 a.m. and I got to get up to use the restroom, but Jim is over in the seat there, and even though I can't sleep, I don't want to talk to Jim because he's going to complain. Nobody wants to be around people that bring them down. If you can lift people up, and you don't have to be the court jester, I tell people in these clinics and stuff I do, you don't have to be telling every joke known to man every minute of the day, because that can get old too, but just be positive and be thankful and try to treat other people like, you know, the golden rule thing. It isn't treat other people the way they treat you. It's treat them the way you wish they would treat you. And I think the more people that go about it that way, the more people can get asked back on tours or to play on records a second or third time. You have to realize that it's 50% talent and playing and 50% what kind of person are you? You got, it's a people business. Music Business Radio, I'm sure, talks a lot about what a people business this is.
The songs don't just come out of nowhere.
Right.
And the records don't just promote themselves. It's a people business. And sometimes I think people tend to think like these big bad corporations. I mean, but the corporations are made out of people, as are the bands and as are fans. You can't lump anybody into like a huge group.
That's right. And the other thing that a lot of younger students don't realize is it's called the music business, not the music friendship. I mean, it is a business. And even though bands have to get along and musicians and singers and agents and record producers and record companies, the music business is a business. And a lot of college-age students I know that are ready to jump off the diving board and jump into the music business pool, they forget that it is the music business. And if someone can do the job better and is cheaper, they will get the gig. You know, it's like I tell people, learn to sing background vocals because it's a business. When a manager comes in and says, well, drummer A played really well, but drummer B played really well and can sing backgrounds. And the manager is probably thinking, I can fire that background singer, take the money I paid that background singer, take it out of this pocket and put it in this pocket, and I get 2 for 1. It is a business.
Right.
You know?
And plus, if you're a nice guy, then he doesn't have to deal with a jerk. So that's going to help you too.
That's right. You know, and I tell people too to be politely persistent. And they say, what does that mean? I said, that's something I learned when I first got out of college. Somebody at some seminar, music business seminar, said, be politely persistent. Call again, and you're reaching a secretary that's going, can you hold? Oh, yeah, Johnny Bag of Donuts. Okay, yeah, you called 3 days ago. I know you're calling again. Well, I was calling to speak with so-and-so, the producer or the record company exec or the manager for this band. Yes, I've left them the message. If you're politely persistent, I was just calling again to follow up to see if they might have gotten my CD. Yes, Johnny Bag of Donuts, we got your CD. If you're really nice, hopefully they won't be rude to you, and you just continue to be politely persistent until, oh, Bob broke his leg. Who are we going to get for the so-and-so tour? Well, Johnny Bag of Donuts rings a bell. He's been calling every day. Check out this CD. It actually works like that.
Well, hey, give us some stories, because I know you've played, as I mentioned, like Duran Duran, James Taylor, Santana. Have you come upon gigs just because you're persistent, just because you're in the right place at the right time?
Yeah, you know, it really is who you know and how well you know them and what kind of relationship you have. I mean, let's go from the first one you said, Duran Duran. Now, I didn't really get to go in and spend a week going to dinner and going to lunch and going up to the hotel rooms and saying, hey, great to meet you. I'm Greg. You know, I didn't even meet anybody in Duran Duran. I just got a call from a producer named Julian Raymond, who was one of the head guys at Capitol Records. And he called and said, hey, Duran Duran's almost done with an album. And there's one more track that I have, and there's drum machine on it. I think it was called Mars to Venus on the album called Pop Trash. And he said, you know, they've flown home, but I need to put real drums on this. Are you available tomorrow? So he said, I have one session, and one session means a 3-hour block from 2 to 5. Can you do one session tomorrow at 2 at A&M? What's it for? Duran Duran. Sure, I'll bring this kit and I'll have my dad's cartage company. My dad has a company that sets up my drums, and he set it all up. Okay, they'll be there at 12 to set up. I'll get there at 1:30 to bang on the drums and get drum sounds for the engineers. We'll start at 2. He said, well, we're only doing one song, so it'll be easy. I got there. They didn't have charts because it's not the kind of like a big band thing that would have charts written out. I just took a legal pad and a Sharpie. I heard the tune 3 or 4 times. I made notes. We went in there and played it a few times. He said, great, thanks a lot. And then 2 weeks later, the check came in the mail. I never even met them. My name came out on the album, or maybe it didn't because it's Duran Duran. They don't want a recording session drummer name being on their album, so it probably didn't even get on the album, my name. But I got paid.
Well, your name's on the check.
My name was on the check,
so that's
thank
good.
God. And that cleared, and everything was cool. So I got my $750 for a double scale recording session. Then I went on to the next thing, and I was very, very happy to be able to say I played on a Duran Duran album. But how did I get it? I didn't get it because I knew Simon Le Bon or anybody. I just knew this producer that had used me once before. We got along well. I think he was happy with the work I did, so I got a call back. And that's kind of all. A friend of mine, Tim Pierce, is one of the most... Well, he plays on more albums than anybody I know, and he's one of the busiest guitar players in L.A. His famous expression is, I'm just glad to be one of the guys on some of these guys' lists. That's all you can hope for, really.
Well, you mentioned when he called you up for the Duran Duran session, he says, oh, this will be easy. Maybe you can just talk about the mindset that you have when you walk into a studio. You've got your kit there. You've never heard the song.
That's the big thing. When you walk in, I don't have a real great memory. In fact, I joke, I got a great memory, but it's short. Somebody plays me a song. 2 minutes later, when I go out there to play it, I can't remember where the stops were, what the rhythm was on the hits. I can't remember the tempo, so I can plug my little metronome in and get a vibe on the tempo. I can't remember when it went to cross stick or full snare, or when you went to the bell of the cymbal or the hi-hat or the washy crash, Foo Fighter kind of... I can't remember stuff, so I have to write it down. And I mean, that Duran Duran track was kind of a basic rock groove with some breaks, but not a lot of, stabs that were like da-da-da-da, digga-digga-digga-da, diddly-gung-gut-diddly-ging-ging, digga-digga-digga-da. It wasn't like playing. I did a Keith Emerson album last year, one of the hardest albums I ever did because it's really heavy prog rock and a lot of odd times and really involved. But I didn't have that much to write down. I just wrote down the beat, where the stops were, what the figures were that we caught. There weren't that many, how it ended, what the tempo was. But if I have to do a really hard thing, I do a lot of movies. I did Devil Wears Prada, The Bucket List, Best in Show, The Mighty Wind, For Your Consideration, Enchanted, Waiting for Guffman, all kinds of movies.
American Pie. Yeah, I've got the list. It's unbelievable.
Well, those are difficult because, they're scores and they go with the movie and they have to be hit. Like, I remember doing a movie with Mel Gibson once called Payback, and he actually walked back into the drum booth. Luis Conti was the percussionist. He's played with Madonna, Steve Winwood, all kinds of people. And he said to Luis, he said, hey, Luis, he said, Mel Gibson took enough care to find out who the musicians were. He said, Luis, I hear you play percussion with Phil Collins. He said, yeah. He said, is he really left-handed? Wow, Luis said, you know that? And he goes, yeah, Phil is left-handed, and he plays with his kit set up backwards. He looks at me and he says, wow, Greg, you're the drum set guy. Was Buddy Rich really the greatest drummer ever? And I went, man, Mel Gibson knows about Buddy Rich. I said, yeah, Mel, he kind of was. He was a child prodigy, and he was the greatest. But then the score came out, and it was a 6-page score. He said, when I fall and I trip on that can and I hit my head on that bumper, could you guys go... And we're both looking at him like... Sure, Mel. Love that bit in Braveheart where you lift up the kilt. What do you say? But it was a very intense score. And this guy, Chris Boardman, wrote the music. And if I wouldn't have really worked on reading music, I would have been dead in the water, David, because I would have just looked at that thing like the RCA Victor dog, turning my head going, what is this?
Does that ever happen with, of course, not to you? You sound like you're coming in prepared. Oh, it does?
Oh, man, there's stuff that I've had to look at and go, wait a minute, I got to take a break. What in the world is this? And I look at the music and I have to just sit down for a few minutes and figure out how do you count this? How do you play? How will I play this on drum set? It's written for orchestra. How am I going to work this out? And then, okay, finally I figured out, talk with the record producer, talk to the director or the artist or whatever, and then you suss it out. But it's not easy. There's a lot of things that I've done that are really super challenging.
And I guess most people will work with you. It goes back to that easy to get along with kind of attitude a lot of these guys have.
Well, if you just act like, oh, man, what's this? This is too weird. You don't expect me to play this. Believe me, there are musicians that, David, you or I wouldn't do this, but they would walk in and go, what's this, man? You wrote this for drum set? This looks like it was written for viola. Well, maybe it was written for viola, but they want you to play it and play in unison with the viola. So instead of having an attitude, you just say, could you help me out with this? Because I'm trying to figure out, would you like me to play with brushes or with plastics or sticks, or how should I? And when you involve them, then in front of all their peers, even if it's a jingle for Pampers, the ad people with Pampers are sitting there in their suits and ties, and then you get the producer to go, oh, well, let me show you how I would do it, and then they look good in front of somebody else. If you really have to confront somebody, say, Bob, can I talk to you for a second? And then go out in the room where just the two of you are going, oh, man, what in the world is this? Who wrote this chart? What? I can't read this. And then he'll, oh, okay, I'll show you what that is. But never embarrass somebody in front of their peers or the people they're working with, because then they'll come at you, you know.
Well, and it's a great technique. If you can make them look good in front of their client, they're going to hire you back.
Exactly.
You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio. More with Gregg Bissonette when we return.
Hey everybody, I'm Billy Yates. In Europe, I'm bigger than Elvis.
Just kidding.
This is Music Business Radio.
Why can't a bank get back to me as fast as I get back to them? I mean, someone asks me a question, I give them an answer right there. But when you go to some banks for help and they tell you that you have to wait while they go out of town to get answers, that's just plain annoying. On the other hand, at Avenue Bank, all the financial decisions are made right here in Nashville. So when you go to Avenue with a request, you get a response, not a big delay. I like that. You will too. Avenue Bank, member FDIC.
Hi, I'm Favored Nation's recording artist Johnny Highland, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
Now back to a special edition of Music Business Radio with Gregg Bissonette.
Let's talk about the Ringo Starr All-Starr Band. That's what you're doing right now. And we were going to record this earlier, but you were in the studio with Ringo.
Yeah, well, you know, we never really know from day to day what the schedules are until the night before. The night before you are flying back on the plane and you find out, okay, the car's picking you up at this time. There's a sound check here. We're going to go into the studio. We're going to do this. We did a live DVD for the Greek show. So we went and did a little bit earlier sound check and got all the camera angles and all that stuff. And so, yeah, you really have to be able to kind of play it by ear. I'll tell you, I've never had more fun than up on stage playing drums with Ringo. I told Ringo last night, I said, I'm going to have some heavy therapy on the couch. He said, what for? And I said, because every other gig I do, I'll look to the right and Ringo Starr won't be there playing double drums with me. And he said, I know what you mean. Don't worry. It'll be okay. And I said, I won't be flying on the Ringo jet, playing double drums with Ringo every night. So
back to the bus.
Back to the buses and the Domino's Pizza and watching Spinal Tap for the millionth time. Every band on every tour still gets a kick out of watching the Spinal Tap movie. But anyway, back to Ringo. You get to play all these hits. Years ago, Ringo said something like, man, I love doing double drums with you and having you in the promo band, Ringo and the Roundheads. I'd love to have you in the All-Star band sometime, but, to be in the All-Star band, you have to have a couple of top 10 hit singles that you sang. And I said, well, that'll never happen. Well, his attorney manager, Bruce, called a few months back in January or whenever it was, March, I forget, but he said, Ringo's run out of drummers with top 10 hits. He wants you to be in the band. But, I'm playing with Edgar Winter. We get to do Frankenstein and Free Ride.
Oh, yeah.
Then Colin Hay from Men at Work. We get to do I Come From a Land Down Under and Who Can It Be Now? Gary Wright.
Billy Squire.
Yeah, Billy Squire. We get to do Lonely as the Night and The Stroke. Gary Wright. We do Dreamweaver and Love is Alive. And then Hamish Stewart from the Average White Band. He sang Work to Do, and he plays bass on all the songs. He's our bass player, but he plays guitar on Pick Up the Pieces out front. So that was an Average White Band hit. So it's like the most fun top 40 band. I kind of tell people it's like being paid to do a summer fantasy camp summer vacation.
Oh, yeah. And plus, those guys have been around. I mean, they're all schooled. We actually had Colin in. His record label's based out of Nashville for his solo stuff. He had just come in and was like so tired, but so gracious, though. You could tell he had been in there for like 20 years in the game and just really a great guy.
He's a great guy.
And I mean, it's got to be amazing to play with guys like that. They're just skilled and they've been around for a long time and they know how to handle and not getting on each other's nerves and they know when to play their parts. And that's got to be great.
Yeah, all the guys in the All-Star band, they're all super, super pros that have done it and been there, done that, and they all have great personalities. They're all great musicians and singers and great people.
Well, what is it like with those guys? I mean, they certainly have everybody's hits, and your job, I think, is to compliment them and let them have the spotlight.
That's right.
And certainly with Ringo, I mean, you've got two drummers in the band. How do you mix that?
Well, the thing is, Ringo jokes after he plays Pick Up the Pieces because he walks up to the mic to sing his next song, Little Yellow Submarine, or the next song he's going to sing. And he goes, he's still singing the song that we just finished by Hamish, Average White Band. And he walks up to the mic, pick up the pieces, pick up the pieces. Boy, that's fun to play. He says, when I play Pick Up the Pieces, I feel like a grown-up. I'm playing grown-up music, and it's like, It's very, very involved R&B, funk drumming. The drummer that played on that album with the Average White Band was Robbie McIntosh, and he passed away right after the album came out, but very technically involved drumming, and Ringo just nails it. I mean, the guy can play anything, and so we just keep an eye on each other. We're very, very sympathetic to if he's going to play a fill, I won't play a fill. I'll just stay on the beat. If I'm going to play a fill, he'll look over at me and sort of go, you take this one, and I'll play the fill. And we really work well together. He's my favorite drummer of all time. He's the drummer that played on most of my favorite songs. What are there, like 250 Beatles songs or something? He played the most amazing parts on the most amazing songs. Think of Come Together without this drum beat. Think of Ticket to Ride without this drum beat. Think of Tomorrow Never Knows without this drum beat. He doesn't play a fill in the whole song. He just grooves. It was like a loop before there were loops. You know, the guy is just my favorite drummer. He has such a swing, David. Every time he plays a fill, you know, he didn't play Strawberry Fields like he played nothing is real. He's got a swing. His favorite drummer of all time, I think, is Cozy Cole. Kind of a Gene Krupa-ish kind of. We do a lot of stuff together where we talk about Cozy Cole. And I brought my trumpet out a few days ago, and we played a little sound check where I played the melody for Topsy. And Ringo played the floor tom, hi-hat, bass drum groove. And we just had fun, but that has so much swing to it. So many rock drummers don't really know how to put swing into their groove, and Ringo is the king of having that swing. You got to be able to sing parts too. You know, in India, I just did a big drum festival in India, and it's kind of like the Native American kid that turns 13 and is given the crossbow and told to go out and hunt and bring back the food for the tribe. And then the kid that's 13 and has his bar mitzvah, or the kid in India that has been loving drums his whole life, but he's never allowed to play the tabla drums. But when he's 13, he's given the tabla drum and he can actually hit it. But for 10 years, he had to practice the syllables. And then he gets the drum and he knows how to play it. In this country, you're 4 years old, play on this drum set. Boom, smack, boom, boom, bop, there's a real respect for the instrument, no matter what instrument it is. If you really learn the pedagogy, you learn how to sing the parts first. If you can sing the part, you can play the part, they say. If you can go, and you've got it in your head, when you sit down, you got to work on the four-way coordination, but if you've got it in your head, it'll be a lot easier, and it'll be in your heart.
You know, I think about the background, and we talked about it earlier in the show that you have with like big band music, and I always think about rhythmically based music, such as like dance music. You know, not just like techno or electronic type stuff, but I feel it really helps musicians and people if they understand like what makes people move.
Right.
If that makes sense. Like all these different styles of music. Like I've watched you pull out time signatures that I didn't even know existed when prepping the interviews, and it seems like you have a really good, not just for the technique of how these drums work, but understanding that it's more than just four on the floor.
The biggest thing is be a fan of lots of different musics. David, when you mention dance, that's our number one job, especially as a drummer. Number one job is to get people to dance. The club owner's going to love it if you can get people off their seats and get them dancing, because then they'll be thirsty. Everybody on the stage wants people to get up, because then it's more exciting. If you can get people out of their chairs and dancing as a drummer, you're doing the right thing. The second thing is your tempo. If you can just not speed up and not slow down, but keep the tempo real consistent, that's number two. Number three is dynamics. The drummer can control the volume of the band better than anybody. If you break down to a whisper, the other musicians are going to have to play soft, or they won't be able to hear the pulse and play with you. If you want it to really soar and be triple forte, fortissimo, bring it way up, and the other musicians will come up. The drummer can really control the tempo and the volume and the vibe. But number one, you hit it on the head. Get them dancing.
You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio. More with Gregg Bissonette when we return.
This is Alan Shacklock, record producer to Roger Daltrey, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Jeff Beck, Meatloaf, and Babe Ruth, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
Why can't you have a banker instead of just a bank? I mean, if your banking relationship consists of pushing phone buttons when a computerized voice tells you to, is that really how you want to bank? On the other hand, if you knew your banker by name, and more importantly, your banker knew you by name, then you've got something. That's how it is at Avenue Bank, because that's how we think banking and life should be. Avenue Bank. The difference is real. Member FDIC.
Hey, I'm Johnny Mann from Computer vs. Banjo, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
Now back to a special edition of Music Business Radio with Gregg Bissonette.
Let's talk about teaching. I've always thought that to be really good at something, or the best way to be really good at something, is to teach it. And I found it really interesting going to your site, greggbissonette.com. You actually are still teaching, and it's reasonably priced. Talk about how important teaching is to you and with your development as a drummer.
Well, I love to teach. I love to give back because my degree in college was music education. I decided with my parents' help that I wanted a degree that actually meant something. I was thinking about music performance degree. Do you really need a degree to say you can perform? No. But can you teach elementary, junior high, high school, college, band, or percussion without a degree? No, you got to have a degree. So I got a degree in music education. In case I didn't make it as a performer, I'd at least have something to fall back on because I love teaching. I don't teach privately as much as I used to, but I do seminars and clinics, and certain times I do master classes where you have 3 or 4 people in a group and stuff like that. And I love to teach because people always ask questions, and by answering the questions, you learn. I learn a lot when I teach. Plus, when I teach, I play. I have 2 drum sets, and I play along with the students. And one of the things you said about 2 minutes ago, David, that is key to the music business, or to any musician to musician or musician to artist relationship, or in any relationship, husband, wife, doctor, patient, it doesn't matter, is listening. If you go into a doctor's office and you get one of these doctors that doesn't want to hear about what's really wrong, how are they going to diagnose your problem? If you go in for therapy because you're trying to be a better parent or a better husband or wife or just a better person in the workplace, or you've got anxiety or anything, how can a therapist help you if they don't listen? You, David, are listening to me. You're not interrupting me. When you talk, I'm listening to you. I'm not interrupting you. How can I answer your questions and help you do a better interview if I don't listen? And how can you have a conversation with me if you don't listen? When you watch somebody on Jay Leno asks a question, or David Letterman asks a question, and then one of the great things about Johnny Carson is he was a really good listener. You have to be able to listen, and listening is an art, and more drum teachers, more music teachers should teach how to listen to band directors, to conductors, to singers, or just listen to the other musicians musically. Because if you don't listen and you just have the blinders on, you're not going to perform well in a group.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the greatest skills that comes from music education is, you mentioned marriage. I mean, it's kind of like being in a band is like being married.
Right.
You have to learn how to play with each other. You've got to keep on tempo. You've got to get, start at the same time and end at the same time and be on pace.
Right.
And, I mean, that's one of the things that people, I don't think, really realize. It's not just technical skill of being able to play a guitar. It's being able to get together with other people.
Right.
And we've all been in bands like that where the drummer's too loud and the guitarist is too loud.
Right. That's exactly right.
And that's one of those skills, I guess, that comes from dealing with different personalities, which you certainly do in the rock music business. But you mentioned Buddy Rich. I mean, he was certainly known for his personality, let's say.
Man, you deal with personalities in rock, in jazz, in big band, in Latin music, in country music, in gospel. I am and have always been a Christian, and you think, well, I'm going to do a gig at the church. Man, you can have more attitude from a lead singer in the church that doesn't get to do gigs, but this is their big Sunday morning chance to go out and sing for the congregation. Oh, it's too fast. Oh, you're too slow. Oh, you're playing too loud. Play with brushes. Do it this way. Do my song first. I mean, any genre of music, you got to just be able to deal with people, and you're always going to have some degree of attitude and compromise, and compromise is everything. You know, it's like a negotiation. If you're negotiating a record contract or you're negotiating a tour salary, you've got to have compromise. You know, you get on the plane and you see these ads, you know, Mr. Karras's negotiating technique. He's helped everyone learn to negotiate. Every part of negotiation is communication, listening, giving them something they want so that you can get something you want. It's all compromise.
What about drumming as a business, speaking of negotiating? Let's talk about how you keep things going as a professional drummer.
Well, I have to do a lot of different things. I have a family, so I'm not the guy that wants to be on the road 10 months out of the year. I have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. And I came home from this 2-month tour, and my daughter Mary's already lost another tooth. And I just don't want to be gone all the time. So I have to do a lot of different things to be able to make my nut. I do drum clinics, I do short tours, I do albums, I do movies, I play on commercials, I teach drum lessons, I do master classes, I do drum DVDs, I do endorsements where I go out and do these drum festivals and stuff. And yeah, you just have to, you don't have to, but if you want to just play drums, you got to, I think, do a lot of different things. Jim Keltner, one of my favorite drummers, who was at the show at the Greek. In fact, he sat in on a little help from my friends at the end, along with Ringo's son, Jason Starkey. Everyone knows his son, Zach Starkey, who plays drums in The Who and Oasis. But he has another son, Jason, and a daughter, Lee. And Jason's a really good drummer. And he came up and was playing on the floor tom on Little Help and Give Peace a Chance. And Jim was playing on Ringo's drums. Well, Jim Keltner said something in Modern Drummer years ago. Someone said, you don't do like commercials, right? You don't play drums on Pepsi-Cola commercials. He says, man, anytime someone wants to set my drums up, I don't have to set them up. They pay the cartage company to set them up. I go to a recording studio, hear my drums mic'd up and sounding amazing in a control room, and I can play music and hang out with other musicians and get paid for it. I'll do it, man. I don't care if it's a commercial for a product or if it's somebody's album or a movie. I'm there, you know, and just that's the right attitude to take. Don't turn down work. If someone wants to pay you to play drums, to me, it doesn't matter if you're playing the Clubfoot or the Enormo Dome, do it. And that's the best way to keep in the loop, you know. Somebody that you work on a wedding with could be somebody that you're playing at Wembley with next week.
Yeah, I think that would keep you versatile as a drummer, too. I mean, just all those different situations, right. You never know when they're going to come in handy. It's like the reading music thing we talked about earlier. I mean, that's what got you the gig, you know, or one of the things.
That's right. Everything combined, you know. Learning all the different styles. You might have to play a polka at a Polish wedding, and then the next thing you know, you're subbing for Trey Cool and Green Day, and it's tum ta tum ta tum ta tum ta. Well, I just played that. It's a polka. You know, punk rock is very polka based. You know.
Well, you're one of the guys that gets hired a lot for bands. Roth, James Taylor, Duran Duran, but you're also a solo artist. So talk about hiring other people for your band.
Well, I have 2 solo albums out. In fact, that whole solo artist career started with our mutual friend that's sitting next to you, Ken Austin. Years ago, he said, I want you to do a solo CD. And I said, I'm not a solo guy. He goes, no, you can be. Get a bunch of musicians together. Get your brother. He's a great songwriter. He's your favorite bass player. Get him to write a bunch of songs, and then just hire anybody you want to play on it. I said, really? Where's the money going to come from? He said, I'll get the money from the drum company, and we'll put it out as a promo CD for the drum company. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And it happened. And then that next thing you know, that album comes out, and then I kind of parlayed that into another solo album that was on Shrapnel Records here in the States.
Known for their guitar stuff, though.
That's right.
You're bringing drums to the guitar label.
Well, because of Ken's idea, he said, it'll be a drum album, but you can hire different musicians. And I said, I'd love to just do trios where we just get different guitar players. What if I got Andy Summers from The Police and Steve Vai and Steve Stevens from Billy Idol's band, and then I got...
Was Richie Kotzen on that one too?
Richie Kotzen, yeah, who was in Poison, but before that was in a bunch of Shrapnel albums and later albums. Joe Satriani, Robin Ford, the great blues guitarist. We had just a whole host of albums on Submarine and my solo album and that first EP that Ken produced with us, and that's how it all started. So I don't really think of myself as a solo artist, but I do have 3 solo CDs, and what your question, I think, was, David, was how does it work on the other end when you're the person that's hiring musicians?
Yeah, did you make them read music?
No. Steve Lukather, who was one of the great guitar players that played on the first EP and then the second solo album, he reads music really well. So we wrote out a chart and gave it to him. Frank Gambale, that also played with Chick Corea and a lot of musicians, he reads music great. So we gave him a chart. A lot of the other ones read music well, but some of them don't. And so we just played it for them. A lot of them made their own charts. That's probably the easiest way, is just send them a CD, or nowadays you send an MP3 of the song. They check it out. They learn it. If they want to make a chart, they can. If they just want to wing it, they can. I'm answering these short questions in way too many words. Long-winded answer was that one. The Reader's Digest answer is, some of them I gave charts. Some of them they played it by ear. Sorry, David.
No, we love that. Think of it like a Shrapnel Records album. We like a lot of notes.
Okay.
That's right. Well, why don't we check out some of that? You've got your album called Submarine, and this is available at your site, GreggBissonette.com.
My site points you to the label, which is called FavoredNations.com. It's a label that Steve Vai started with the guy that started Guitar Center, Ray Shear. He is not with Guitar Center anymore, but he sold the company years ago and said, I want to start a label. So Ray is in partners with Steve Vai on a label called Favored Nations. And in the music business, do you know what the term in a contract, Favored Nations, means?
Yeah, let's explain Favored Nation, because that's so important for everybody to know.
Yeah, always put in your contract that you want a Favored Nations clause. And that means if the guitar player gets a raise, you automatically get a raise. If you're on a CD and B.B. King is one of the artists, and B.B. King's manager negotiates X amount of dollars, then you'll get whatever B.B. King gets, because Favored Nations means that everybody's the same. So always ask for a Favored Nations clause. You probably won't get it, but ask for it. You might get it.
Always ask. Absolutely. Well, you got a track called Sun Man. Introduce this track for us.
Oh, thank you. Well, my brother wrote this song. It's kind of Beatle-y, and it's got Tim Pierce on guitar. I'm actually singing lead. My brother's singing backgrounds. My brother Matt's playing bass, and I'm playing drums. And it's a song, The Sun Man, but it's spelled S-O-N, The Sun Man. Here comes the Sun Man.
So here it is. This is Gregg Bissonette with his brother Matt, Sun Man on Music Business Radio. Man by Gregg Bissonette. Gregg is my guest today. He's played with guys like David Lee Roth, Duran Duran, James Taylor, and a host of other people. The album Submarine, it's available at GreggBissonette.com, also iTunes, Amazon, wherever records are sold. Gregg, give us some thoughts on just your longevity in the music business. As I mentioned earlier, I was prepping this, looking at videos, and of course I've known about you for 20 years.
Oh, thank you.
Like, man, he looks young. I mean, you look as young now as you did 20 years ago. So we got to know, man. Is like something in the water in Los Angeles?
I owe you $20. No way. Come on, you're too kind. You know who's one of my heroes is Louis Bellson. Have you ever heard of Louis Bellson?
No, never.
He was the drummer in Duke Ellington's band in 1946. He was married to Pearl Bailey. She's passed away. He's remarried, but he's about 85 years old, and he's still playing. He's still making records. He's still touring. He does big bands, small groups, recording sessions, his own albums. And I look at Louis Bellson, and he was at our wedding years ago, and I said, Louis, how do you do it, man? You're doing all this stuff. And he said, well, Greg, I'll tell you. He talks a little bit like Ronald Reagan. Well, I'll tell you. Nancy and I were out at the ranch, and he said, no, I'll tell you. He says, I don't booze it hard. I might drink a glass of red wine once in a while, but I don't eat, a lot of sugar. I stay pretty healthy. I exercise a lot. I walk like crazy. But he said, and this is what blew me away, the number one thing is I try not to let negative thoughts enter into my mind. I said, Louis, in the music business, where the record company waits a year to pay you, and you got to be your own manager, your own attorney, your own agent, your own accountant, your own lawyer. How do you keep positive? He says, I just try to not let negative thoughts enter into my mind. And I thought, man, that will keep you young upstairs. The mind is a very, very powerful thing, and that you've got to just think positive. I look at Ringo, who's one of my heroes. Ringo just turned 68 on July 7th. We did a Larry King thing where he had everyone do peace and love sign and say peace and love at 12 noon on July 7th. That's what he wanted for his birthday. We walked outside of the hotel in Chicago, thousands and thousands of people on the streets saying, Ringo, we love you, peace and love, happy birthday. Complete strangers singing him happy birthday. And he is one of the most positive, loving, funny, sarcastic in a loving way guys I know, and he is so in shape. The guy's got abs of steel, man. He really watches what he eats. He stays away from sugar. He exercises, does the treadmill. He's just one of my heroes, and so I wish I was in Ringo's shape now, and I'm not. He's in way better shape than me. And the guy's just, you get role models like that, and that kind of gets you motivated. He's one of my serious role models, not only my favorite drummer, one of my favorite people and dear friends, but just a role model. I'll look at him playing. I'll look to the right, and I'm kind of slumped over in like Buddy Rich posture. Buddy Rich was a great drummer, but he had horrible posture. And I'll look at Ringo, and he does Pilates, and he's got this perfect posture, and I'll kind of sit up straight, and he'll look at me, and he'll go, oh, yeah, and he'll sit up straight. I mean, he's one of my heroes. And when you get role models like that, I think they kind of spur you on as you get older,
Thanks for listening to this special edition of Music Business Radio with Gregg Bissonette. For more on Music Business Radio and exclusive podcast-only content, visit musicbusinessradio.com.
Thank you for listening to Music Business Radio. Music Business Radio is a production of Lightning 100 Tuned In Broadcasting Incorporated, Nashville, Tennessee. Produced by Gary Crane, Dan Buckley, and David Hooper. Pro Tools post-production by Justin Hamill. Production coordination by Jesse Smith. And Lester held the umbrella. Pro audio support provided today by DigiDesign with exclusive in-studio guitars courtesy of Waterstone Musical Instruments. For more information about Music Business Radio, visit musicbusinessradio.com. We are Music Business Radio, broadcasting from WRLT Studios at Marathon Village, Nashville, Tennessee.
Music Business Radio.
You've been listening to Music Business Radio, brought to you by Avenue Bank, dedicated to serving the music business industry. Find out more at thedifferenceisreal.com.